panel discussion for today, may I please take the pleasure of introducing the moderator for the panel discussion, who will then take care of the discussion with the other panelists. So, Dr. Partha Kumar Sarkar. He completed his master's in biochemistry from Calcutta University and his PhD from Jadavpur University in the area of molecular biology. He had done his postdoctoral studies at the Wordsworth Center of New York State Department of Health, USA, where he worked on yeast genetics as a model to study rare human genetic disease. Ever since he returned to India, Dr. Sarkar is working in biopharmaceutical industry and part for both Indian and multinational companies for last 2 decades. Dr. Sarkar has strong expertise in operations management, leading large teams, building best-in-class manufacturing operations, led various cross-functional projects and cross-country projects to develop multiple arrays of vaccines against infectious diseases. He continued his involvement in various collaborative projects with universities, academic institutes, industries, and various governmental and non-governmental organizations. Dr. Partha is currently Associate Vice President at Bharat Biotech International Limited, where he leads a large team of scientists to develop and manufacture human vaccines and biotherapeutics, including vaccines against COVID-19. With this, over to you, Dr. Partha.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you, Dr. Redana, Dr. Kamath, for this invitation, and I'll share my screen first. Yes, sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So we are in the panel discussion. So my first job obviously is to introducing the panelists. So we have a panelists from various domains who are working in the biopharmaceutical industry. Starting with Dr. Guhan Jayaraman. He is a professor and the current head, Department of Biotechnology, IIT Madras. Professor Jayaraman is a chemical engineer with primary research interest in the area of metabolic engineering for biopolymer production, biofuel production from lignocellulosic biomass, and continuous chromatography processes for recombinant protein purification. Dr. Jayaraman has several international collaborative projects in these areas and also has undertaken several industrial consultancy projects in areas ranging from recombinant protein purification to biofuels and nutraceuticals. Dr. Jayaraman is the principal investigator for many DBT-funded and BIDAC funded projects in the area of metabolic engineering. He was a joint recipient of the BIDAC Innovator Award 2019 and also mentored the IIT Madras team, which won the IGM 2008 awards in foundational advances and best engineered biobrick categories. Dr. Jayaraman also is the faculty in charge of the BIDAC funded bioincubator facility at the IIT Madras Research Park from 2013 to 2020, and where he established to promote incubation to startups in biotechnology. He has also established a BIDAC funded early translational accelerator to facilitate technology transfer from academia to laboratories to industry. So welcome, Professor Jayaraman.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar.
I'll next move to Dr. Ravi Krovidi. Dr. Ravi is right now the CEO of Ingenuity Biosciences. He did his PhD in quantitative proteomics, LCMS, and transcriptomics analysis at Max Planck Institute of Immunobiology in Germany. Dr. Ravi started his career as a junior research fellow at the CCMB and continued to grow in different organizations such as Dr. Reddy's, Thermo Fisher Scientific, and Lambda Therapeutics. In 2017, he headed Analytical Division, Protein Analytica, and Safety Champion. And in 2018, he headed Center for Advanced Protein Studies at Syngene International Limited. In October 2020, he became Chief Executive Officer of Ingenuity Biosciences, which is premier bioanalytical laboratory offering large molecule bioanalysis services to global clientele empowered by cutting edge technologies. So welcome, Dr. Ravi.
Yes, sir. He'll be joining us in a couple of minutes.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
Thank you. We have Mr. Veduti Chakraborty with us. Veduti Chakraborty has done his M.Pharm and M.Tech in biotechnology from Jadavpur University, Kolkata. He has 24 years of industrial experience at Oakford and Dr. Reddy's in various areas like R&D, quality, clinical, and learning and development. He was a team member for several recombinant biopharmaceuticals development and launch in India and the globe, including erythropoietin and rituximab. His passion lies in teaching industrial concepts to students and budding researchers, and that is why he's a guest faculty of Jadavpur University in Calcutta, ISR Calcutta, and Naratsozu Business School, Simli Medical University, and Kazakhstan. His hobby is astronomy and science writing. Very interesting. Welcome, Veduti. Veduti, you are here. I think you can hear us.
Sorry, I was mute. Okay, thank you, Dr. Partha Sarkar. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you so much.
Welcome. I would like to move to Dr. Miraj Singh. Dr. Miraj Singh is a PhD in biochemistry and structural biology from IMTech Chandigarh. He possesses more than a decade experience in research and development in the area of protein structure, function, relationships, structure-based drug designing, development of biosimilar products. So Dr. Singh has worked with many GLP accredited laboratories and CGMP manufacturing facilities to establish the quality management system in these facilities. Dr. Singh is managing a portfolio of almost 30 different biosimilar products and establishment of GLP analytical and CGMP biological manufacturing facilities, along with state-of-the-art cell line repositories in India. Dr. Singh is also focusing on projects for indigenous development of novel and next generation biomolecules, along with indigenous development of various raw materials and consumables required for biomanufacturing of biopharmaceuticals in India. Dr. Singh is currently working as program manager with National Biopharma Mission, a joint program of Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, and World Bank to strengthen the ecosystem of biopharmaceutical and healthcare research and accelerated product development in India. Welcome, Dr. Miraj.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarkar. Thank you all the organizers for having me here. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Sunil Kulkarni, he's associated with biologics product development for over 20 years. He comes with a versatile background in complementing faculties of pharmaceutical sciences, bioprocessing, chemical engineering, and business management. His total experience includes 10 years in reputed research institute such as Oak Ridge National Laboratory and University of Cincinnati in US, as well as in leading biologics organizations such as Intas Pharmaceuticals, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, and USV Limited in senior leadership roles. His core expertise includes technical assessment and development of the entire CMC value chain for biopharmaceuticals from clone to clinic. He has successfully executed strategic planning for biosimilar development programs through effective cross-integration between different functions such as research, manufacturing, regulatory, clinical, and commercial development. He is presently working as a director for innovation and as director of National Center for Nanoscience and Nanotechnology at the University of Mumbai, while actively consulting for various biopharmaceutical organizations for strategic product development issues. So welcome, Dr. Samir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Partha, for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and my thanks to the organizers to have me on this esteemed panel. Looking forward to some interesting discussions today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Samir. Okay, so I'll take to because we have a week-long workshop, so I'll just take you through our introductory presentation, which probably keep the discussion and what we wanted to discuss, especially the bioprocess technology and biopharmaceuticals. So when you look into the biopharmaceuticals, on the left side of the column, there is the classical definition of biopharmaceuticals, the pharmaceutical drug product manufactured from biological resources. So vaccines, blood components, allergenics, somatic cells, gene therapies, recombinant proteins, monoclonal antibodies, cell therapy, everything was included. But as we move more and more and regulatory systems become more and more mature, so there is a difference now. So on the right side, very advanced therapy medicinal products, which has been kind of EMA has been defining, the gene therapy medicine, somatic cell therapy medicines, tissue engineered medicines, they will be in the advanced therapeutic category. But today we will be mostly focused on what is there in the center, which is engineered macromolecular products. We have recombinant therapeutic proteins, recombinant monoclonal antibodies, and recombinant vaccines, and obviously vaccines in general because of the biopharmaceuticals. And all these three, when, as you have heard about the talk from Dr. Shunit and also the last talk, that slowly it will be also moving to biosimilar once they are getting off-patented. And this exactly fits the bill. If you recall, or I do not know, some of you probably joined, this slide is actually from Dr. Mahesh Bhalgar, who has been given the CEO of Syngene, who has given the introductory talk in the first day, that how this biopharmaceutical industry is moving. And he was kind enough to share the slide with me so that I can have a better introduction. So this slide clearly shows that among the market, a monoclonal antibody is 56%, recombinant product is 33%, and bioengineered vaccine is 9%. So this whole of global biological therapies revenue or technology is been dominated by three, which I shown in my previous slide. So our concentration continuously will be on that. But if you look for an investor who has been looking for a return, as you take more and more risk, especially in the cell and gene therapy and other areas, probably you'll be getting more and more return in shorter period of time. But the take-home message from this slide is that we'll be staying with the recombinant product, monoclonal antibodies, and bioengineered vaccine for the bioprocess development talk or discussion in next few years. And as I told, when you move from this area to the, when it's get off-patented, there'll be biosimilars. And this slide shows that biosimilar markets are continuously will be evolving over the years for all across the globe. More and more people will be getting biosimilar drugs as they are getting more and more off-patented. Now, this is the part of the biopharmaceutical industry. So what about the bioprocess, which is today's? So bioprocess will be dependent always on two factors. One, on the left side, what kind of platform technology is getting utilized. So we all know a DNA, a platform technology, which is the DNA gets cloned either in bacteria, yeast, mammalian cells, or insect cell. This will be giving rise to various biopharmaceuticals, which is multi-domain fusion proteins, monoclonal antibodies, viral or bacterial coat proteins, enzymes, wherever they can be used. So whenever we are going for discussing in a process, the platform technology becomes very important. On the right side, we have the process technology. It's a very simplistic view taken from a small journal where you see that raw material stays as the input with the cell bank of the vial, and it always goes through an upstream process and the downstream process to produce the drug substance, which later gets formulated to give you the drug product. So this is the essence. On one side, we have the platform, another side, we have the process technology, which will be developing the bioprocess, will be dictating, utilizing the platform, part of the products we are currently manufacturing. Now, this slide also I got from Dr. Mahesh, but this actually showed that because of the COVID, I think we cannot discuss any topic these days without discussing a short way with COVID. You see that bioengineered vaccine will be really making that SARS-CoV-2 vaccine the most active biological drug type will be under development in next few years. And it is very clear from this graph that bioengineered vaccine will be also one of the target development, and accordingly the bioprocess will be changing. The COVID also gave out two different things. This is a slide which is basically the vaccines. It's a very, very busy slides, but I tell you not to focus on any of these slides, only focus on the blue and yellow. The yellow is the vaccines which has been developed over the years for against the virus or pathogenic virus, and the blue one, which has been mostly against the pathogenic bacteria. As we know, till now, we do not have any vaccine against parasites. We do not have any vaccines against major fungus. So this is the area, but I also will tell you to look into the top of this column. So if you broadly divide the vaccine development platform, they are live attenuated type, you have inactivated whole organism type, you have purified proteins, polysaccharide conjugates, and also genetically engineered. As you heard the last talk, hepatitis B surface antigen is obviously one of the genetically engineered vaccine, and so does HPV, which came obviously in the 21st century. But what we really got from COVID, and also it has been mentioned in the last talk, that if you look into this area, so this is basically a sum up of the total number of vaccines till date approved against COVID, mostly they are emergency use authorization. You see the first 4 columns, we had these platforms ready before COVID, so we could utilize and can come up with a vaccine. But what we got really COVID, and which will be shaping up the bioprocesses in future, is whatever there in the last 2 columns. You look at engineered viral vector vaccines, which was mostly adenovirus vector vaccine, has been developed only after this pandemic. We had one Ebola vaccine with adenovirus platform with very, very limited use. So a challenge which has been given us to the opportunity to develop a completely new platform, which is a viral vector vaccine, and currently saving millions of lives across the world. And so does the RNA vaccine. So which was been a concept for few years in last few years, or maybe 1 or 2 decades now, becoming a reality. If there is a DNA vaccine in India also is under development, if you know, that also will be paving the way, probably the first DNA vaccines to be approved for any country for human utility. So in some sense, it's really a great time for platforms, great time for bioprocesses. It's not very important just on the left slide that different countries obviously are trying to develop the product. India is obviously already has developed Covaxin, and there are 2 or 3 new vaccines for against COVID is already on the horizon. This was a very slide which one of my colleagues earlier prepared for something else, but I took it's really a favorite. Once a product goes to the commercial utilization, so manufacturing becomes the heart of the company, because whatever you manufacture, whatever you can sell, you can get revenue. But this manufacturing is being aided by various different functions, where if you are a new entrant in the area, in the industry, so you'll be knowing that you do not need to be in a particular area, but you do have an opportunity if you are either an IP person, a quality control, quality assurance person, a regulatory affairs person, a project management person, research development persons, and all of them. So basically all aided manufactured. But this is what happens when a product is already started getting manufactured. But when manufacturing, before the manufacturing gets involved, so we also have the research and development. This is the crux where the bioprocesses are developed to see that it goes to the production. And if you see on the right side or the center, so all the concepts start from an academic institutions across the world, and then the process technology and analytical technology get developed between the academic institution and industries. We have the CROs and CMOs helping them to carry out these activities on the right. And they are really being shaped by the regulators. The government has 2 rules, obviously one for the funding, one part of the regulation, and also there are non-profit organizations. But crux also this is that how is your human resource? How is the capability of your people? Now, I'll be happy to tell you, this is my last slide for the introduction. So happy to tell you, we have representation in the panel from all across this chain. So we could actually bring various perspectives to the table. So I'll then now go to the panel discussion, and probably I'll ask Dr. Samir to talk, because at the initial part of the start is the process technology, and specialty technology starts with an upstream, as I have pointed out in my early slide. So upstream is the start part. So how and what is your thought process on the upstream part of the production in the biopharmaceuticals? Over to Dr. Samir.
Thank you, Dr. Partha. What I'm going to do is I'll probably share my screen and just share a couple of slides so that there is some understanding about what I'm speaking. One second.
Dr. Partha has to close so
Yes,
that you
yes.
can.
Yes, I'll stop share. Yes.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, Dr. Samir.
Yeah, so is my slide visible?
Yeah.
I mean, is my screen visible?
It's still coming.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, so I'm going to talk about, the biosimilars or, essentially the processing part for biosimilars. And, I actually like this slide because it, in a way, gives the perspective of the complexity that we are dealing with. Unfortunately, I don't know why this is not going in the full screen mode. Anyway, so basically, what are biosimilars, right? I mean, these are basically, in a way, follow-on biologics, which are brought to the market once the patents, permit them. I mean, the patent scenario permits it. Now, when we take a look at a small molecule, I mean, like an aspirin, it's like, 180 Dalton molecule. And I can say that, okay, we are now here trying to duplicate something like, if I have to use an analogy, I'm trying to duplicate a bicycle where every nut and bolt has to match, and not that complicated a job. Now, if we come to some mid-generation biologics like insulin, erythropoietin, interferons, maybe Grastim, filgrastim. So basically, here now we are talking about a molecule which perhaps ranges somewhere between say 5,000 Dalton to maybe around 35,000 Daltons. And there now I'm going to take a simile in the form of a Ferrari. Now, I am here in the business of actually trying to reproduce a Ferrari where every nut and bolt has to match, and necessarily has to result into not something like 10 kilometers an hour or 20 kilometers an hour that I get with a bike, but something close to maybe 150, 200 kilometers an hour that I would need from a Ferrari. So, that's the level of complexity. And one more thing here to add is that's the level of risk associated as well. I mean, if you fall from a bike, at the most you will break a bone. If you crash a Ferrari, I mean, other than the financial damage that it would make you, perhaps you might lose your life or get paralytic for life or whatever. And now let's come to the, the big giants, which are necessarily the monoclonal antibodies. And here now we are talking about a molecular weight dimension of somewhere close to 150,000 Daltons. So, something like 1,000 times more than an aspirin. And now here, if I have to use an analogy, I would use a A380, the largest aircraft in the world. And now I'm talking about trying to duplicate a A380, where basically every nut and bolt and every function has to match that of an aircraft. And of course, it's supposed to carry those many number of passengers at, some serious speed. But the risk associated is also equally complex. If an aircraft crashes, obvious result is death. So, that's the reason I like this slide, because it gives in one shot, a very good perspective about what really is the level of complexity that we are talking about when we say that we are trying to develop biosimilars. It's not something like, coming out with a small pharmaceutical. And when we talk about a complex molecule like this, obviously the processes play a very, very crucial role in ensuring the quality of such a product, where you're talking about a polypeptide chain that results into something close to 150,000 Daltons, where somewhere upwards of 3,000 carbons are there, maybe somewhere close to 5,000 hydrogens. I mean, this is just something that I have picked up from the internet for a monoclonal antibody. Now, when we talk about the process flow, right? I mean, now if I have to speak about a process flow for biosimilars, essentially, it's very straightforward, right? I mean, you basically take a DNA fragment, you incorporate into, necessarily a vector, and then put it into an appropriate host system, either a prokaryote or a eukaryote system. and then ensure that you're selecting the best out of whatever you've created, in the clone systems. And then, once those are selected, that particular cell bank, which gets created as a research bank, goes into the fermentation, or essentially the process development, upstream process development, where you are essentially trying to optimize the nutrition, optimize the culturing conditions, etc. And then once you have the product, it goes through the purification scheme, different maybe unit operations of chromatographic and filtration based unit operations, and finally resulting into a formulated product that goes for human consumption. Now here, while you're doing this whole thing, obviously the most crucial aspect here is the analytical assessment, because the only way that you would actually get to know what product you are making is through the analytics. And I like this statement: the quality of a product is simply as good as its analytics claims to be so. So if your analytics are not good enough, if you do not have appropriate analytical methodologies in place, you are necessarily not going to be able to understand the quality of the product. It's like, basically 6 blind men in a room with an elephant, and you don't know, whether it's a wall, whether it's a rope, whether it's a, a dagger, whatever. So, if we look at the simple process flow, most of, it more or less starts with identifying the quality target product profile for a biologic molecule. Like if you say, for example, you're developing a monoclonal antibody, you need to know what are the quality target profile, product profiles, QTTPs, based on what is currently available in the market. So, and Beda is here, Beda and I have worked together. A lot of interactions happened during those days. Basically, having QTPP in place is of paramount importance, because that actually guides your overall process development. You need to know what you are supposed to develop. What are the glycosylation features that you are looking at? What sort of sequence is that you are looking at? What kind of folding is that you are looking at? What sort of purity you are looking at? And all of those aspects. And the overall objective of actually ensuring having this particular information is to enable risk assessment when you are necessarily going after a process development, identifying the process parameters that can result into deviations from the quality that you need to have. Then also when you are developing a certain process, it also enables you to get ranges on the critical process parameters. And what I mean by critical process parameters, or what is generally meant by critical process parameters, are those process conditions which necessarily can result into a clinically, deviating difference between a biosimilar and the originator. What it means is, almost all the regulatory agencies across the world have identified biosimilars as follow-on biologics which are highly similar structurally, but where certain minor structural differences are permitted, as long as those differences do not lead to any clinical implications. And by clinical implications, we mean safety and efficacy of these molecules. So basically, these are certain things that a process development, a good process development, is supposed to actually provide for you. And once you know what are the critical process parameters, then you are able to introduce appropriate control strategies on the process. You are able to introduce appropriate GMP modules into the process, where change controls or other things can actually be facilitated. In case there is a deviation, your appropriate process development enables very quick resolution to that deviation through the investigation that might result out of it. And then most importantly also, it identifies the critical raw materials. So what is it that you are supposed to use? I mean, which particular salt is better, which salt is not that good. So things like that. And I just want to briefly introduce the critical attributes, particularly for the monoclonal antibodies, because without that, I think the process discussion may not be very viable. So when we talk about monoclonal antibody, or in general, for any protein, sequence variants are very, very crucial, in the sense the amino acid chains that we are talking about, these are extremely crucial. Are there any amino acid substitutions? I mean, although most of the cell lines are developed through appropriate codon optimizations, etc., but do you, ensure that? How do you ensure that? We need to essentially have appropriate mass spectrometry done to claim that we have the right sequence in hand. Then at times there can be incorrect signal sequence clipping. So when the molecule is getting excreted out of the host system, let's say a Chinese hamster ovary cell line, after glycosylation, during that excretion, there is a possibility that the signal sequence get clipped off at a different position, resulting into completely different properties for that molecule. Then glycosylation is considered another major critical quality attribute, because it is known now that it influences the functionality of the molecule. For example, afucosylation is known to enhance the ADCC activity for a molecule, for a monoclonal antibody. The antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity. Then high mannose is again known that it can influence the clearance, the half-life of that particular molecule. Then there are certain polysaccharide components like gal-alpha-gal linkages, which are known to be immunogenic. So these can have impacts on the safety. And therefore, appropriate understanding and appropriate process development to ensure that these quality attributes are properly adhered to is something very prime or extremely important when somebody actually gets into developing a process for a monoclonal antibody. Then there are certain other variants like charge variants or glycation or deamidation. Now these are variants. Here basically you might be able to separate these out because these are charge variants. You might be able to separate these out during the downstream processing. But things like sequence variants or the quality attributes such as sequence variants or the glycosylation features, these are features which cannot be really manipulated or managed during the downstream, and therefore it is extremely imperative that these are managed during upstream itself. So now coming to what necessarily would constitute an upstream process. So the objective of an upstream process is to ensure that we get maximum productivity. That it necessarily secretes or it necessarily produces as high a quantity as possible for the protein of interest. And the other major objective is that basically it creates a quality match with the originator or the innovator product for CQAs which cannot be influenced in the downstream processing. Now, like I said, so some examples of such CQAs or the critical quality attributes are the protein sequence, the disulfide linking. So disulfide linking, basically the cysteines and those, the locations of these particular disulfide linkages are going to be manipulated only in the upstream process. In fact, in my opinion, they cannot even be manipulated in the upstream processes. They have to be necessarily managed at the cell line level, at the at the molecular biology level, in the genetic system itself. Glycosylation is another major thing that can be modulated in the upstream process. And the other part, the last part I have included here, charge variants. Although charge variants are possible to be reduced through the downstream process, but if you can get as similar content of charge variants during your upstream process optimization itself, that's going to necessarily enable higher yields through your downstream, because you won't have to actually separate out these particular charge variants which are necessarily impurities, and the lesser impurities, the higher the yield. So that's the overall objective of enabling or of carrying out or conducting the optimal upstream process development. And now, how do you achieve that? How do you really meet these objectives? So some of the optimizing conditions, like for example, media composition, right? I mean, like what sort of nutrient media is required for what cell line for which product, and these are permutation combinations which have to be worked out right at the beginning, because these permutation combinations are going to modify the glycan sequences, or they are going to modify the disulfide linking, or they are going to modify to a certain extent what sort of charge variants are getting produced. They are going to modify how much amount of protein is getting produced. So when we talk about media composition, I mean everybody knows that for a mammalian cell system, basically the basal media is something which is used, or for microbial systems. Yes.
Samir, you have 1 minute more. Huh?
Yeah, I'm done here. This is the last slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, these particular optimizing conditions have to be really looked at. And then, the other crucial conditions are the physical conditions, the processing formats. I mean, whether you want to go through the continuous fed batch or concentrated fed batch or perfusion type of reactors. And these are going to have implications with respect to the quality of the product as well as the quantity. Then, what's going to be your seed train that you are necessarily constituting, the vial to production reactor. What sort of dimensions, what sort of volumes are you really, supposed to look at? Then what sort of reactor designs are you going to look for? Whether, the types of impellers to enable appropriate mass transfer coefficients, types of spargers to enable appropriate gas transfer into the system. And then, other physical conditions like pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen, agitation, etc. So this is where I would stop. This is the upstream side. I thought I will just, give a very brief preview, I would say. In fact, I can speak on this probably for the next 4 or 5 hours, if not more. But I'll stop here because I think, the next panelist hopefully will be covering the downstream part, as we move forward on the process.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Samik. Yeah, we'll come back to it, but thanks for really highlighting that how in the upstream part we should be taking the QTPP and then go to the next stage. So after upstream, we'll be going to the downstream. I think I'll call Professor Jayaraman to one of the major things for the chromatography, because one of the popular bioprocess step utilizes the chromatography, and how the chromatography area has been shaping up the bioprocess in the biopharmaceuticals. Please, if you can talk on that.
So thank you, Dr. Sarkar. Can you see my screen?
So you have 5 minutes. Sorry for.
Oh, that's all right.
Yes.
But I have 5. I'll cut out some of my slides.
Yeah,
but are you able to see?
You can share. No, you have not shared it yet. Please share it.
So, okay. All right. Are you able to see it now?
Yes. Now it's fine. You go to the full screen, please. Yeah.
Not able to see where to go to full screen now.
I think we can see it. That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. So I'll just focus a bit on the chromatographic aspects of downstream processing. And since it's only 5 minutes, there are many things I'll skip. So I apologize if I skip many slides. I also think that often when people focus on downstream processes, they do not focus so much on process factors. As Dr. Samir Kulkarni was just mentioning, a lot of the focus is often on the biological characteristics of the product, and of course, that plays a very crucial role in the whole process design, in the downstream process design, as much as purity requirements and regulatory issues. I think you have been through all this over the past few days. But from an engineering perspective, from a process perspective, the parameters that are really important if you want to minimize the process costs and optimize the process are 4 factors: the recovery, the throughput, the purity, and the concentration that you get. And the whole objective, of course, is to minimize the matrix and solvent costs while maximizing the recovery and purity. And these are often difficult trade-offs because you often get one at the expense of the other. And why is this objective important? Because as most of you would know, downstream processes are the most expensive aspect of the whole process, ranging from 50 to 80% of the whole process cost. And in downstream process, chromatographic processes are the expensive, most expensive unit operation. And in chromatography, it's the matrix costs, which are most expensive. So that one single factor, what is the overall amount of matrix that you use to purify a unit quantity of protein, can sometimes determine your process costs, and it can vary as much as an order of magnitude. So I'll skip the usual things that people need to do, which is to sequence the correct set of operations. But one thing that I'll focus on here, which people often don't do, is that they need to quantitate the process at each and every step. Okay, people often characterize the product, they look at the qualitative aspects of the product, but they do not quantify the product in terms of the purity, the concentration, the recovery, and so on, because this is what will help us not only to get a reproducible process, but also a scalable process. So apart from these, it is very important to, as Dr. Kulkarni was mentioning, to have very good online and offline analytics, which enables us to validate the process, and that is again required to make it very reproducible and robust, and finally to make it very scalable. So I'll skip all these issues, but if you have questions, we'll come back to some of these issues. I'll quickly focus on a couple of aspects which are very important as far as chromatography is concerned. And in this, I'll just focus on elution chromatography, which is the most commonly used mode of chromatography. In this, especially if you're going to try to overload a matrix in order to minimize the utilization of matrix to the amount of product purified, one will often see that the elution profiles have a long tail. And these kinds of tailing elution profiles lead to a lot of product dilution. It leads to lower throughput. It can overlap with other impurities and lead to loss of purity and so on and so forth. So often the objective is to concentrate the product, that is to minimize this tailing. One of the techniques which was used, I mean, this is something I worked on during my PhD days 30 years back, is a technique called displacement chromatography, not often very used in the industry because this process tends to be rather complex. But this works only when the product is fairly concentrated. As Dr. Kulkarni mentioned, that is why in upstream process we tend to concentrate the product, because that lowers the overall cost of the operation. But in a chromatography, if the product is concentrated, one can take advantage of many other techniques. So in such a process, since the product is concentrated, they would be adsorbing in the nonlinear part of their isotherm. And if you displace it using a high affinity displacer, they all tend to elute as adjacent bands in a sequential in the sequence of their affinities, and you end up with a typical chromatographic profile as this, which is a displacement chromatograph. So this can lead to what one would call as simultaneous purification and concentration of the product, okay, and also improve the throughput dramatically. The other kind of scenario is something which we use currently in our lab, which is continuous chromatographic system, and this is in the context of protein refolding that we are doing. Often protein refolding leads to huge amounts of dilution. You're all familiar with it, huge amounts of buffer that's taken up. So what we are doing is chromatographic assisted refolding in a continuous chromatographic system. So this is a 3-column, what we call as a periodic countercurrent chromatography, where 3 different columns are used in in a semi-continuous fashion, and they are switched in terms of the operations. So while one column is being loaded, some other column you would have elution going on, and that column, after it's being eluted, will go to the next step where it would get loaded and so on. So this is something which we are using to refold the inclusion bodies or the solubilized inclusion bodies in a immobilized metal affinity chromatographic system. And what we have found is that we can dramatically increase the throughputs. And you can see that this is going over nearly 20 hours of periodic operation, whereby you get fairly consistent activity of the refolded protein. You can get fairly pure protein, and as much as about 70% of refolded protein, as opposed to what we used to get in batch chromatography, about 40% of refolded protein. So both in terms of recovery, throughput, reproducibility, this is where a lot of chromatography would tend to go in future in terms of continuous chromatography. I think there are 2 different processes I just alluded to. I'll stop here. Just gave me 5 minutes, so I'm sorry. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Professor. Sorry, I think we would like to hear it for 3 to 4 hours, probably. Very interesting slide.
Yes, someday.
But I think both the upstream and downstream showed that how really in every stage we really need to measure and quantitate, and On that note, I'll call upon Dr. Ravi to highlight that how is the analytics important and how that helps in the process development, especially for the monoclonal antibodies and biosimilars.
Sure,
Dr.
Dr.
Ravi.
Thank you so much for the initial introduction, and I would like to thank all the organizers for giving me this opportunity to take part in this panelist discussions. And I would also like to thank Nidhi Khurana, who's actually been, very energetic right from the beginning, coordinating the slides, coordinating the entire event. And thanks to Professor Redana once again. So coming to the core area of discussion today on the analytics, as Dr. Samir has mentioned, analytics do play a center stage. Like if you look at biological molecules, these are certainly complex. What makes them more challenging, or the production of these molecules is more challenging because the entire process, the life, if you look at the cellular machinery, it itself is dynamic as compared to the small molecules, which is more of a stepwise reaction mechanism where the molecules are manufactured, maybe they are purified, and then there is impurity assessment, as compared to biologics, which go through a whole lot of extensive cycle. You have seen the earlier speakers talking about the upstream. What are the challenges? What are the various variables that come into a role, right from the media selection, right from the reactor design, the pH, the various critical aspects. These minor variables, they do bring in huge modifications, especially, for example, if you look at the glycosylation. So these modifications inherently impact the functioning of the molecule as such. It could be the pharmacokinetic assessment, that is in terms of the longevity of this molecule inside the particular human body. So if these have to be analyzed, in fact, analytics, especially the advanced analytics, it does play an important role. So when it comes to a typical biotech industry, there are multiple divisions, like the upstream division. There's a downstream. There is analytics, which is actually, either it takes the blame because the pressure to perform on analytics is significantly higher. Like whatever batches are coming out of upstream, whatever in-process samples are coming from downstream, they have to be quickly analyzed, and then the report has to be generated for in-house samples, etc. Now, if you look at the technologies that are used in the analytics, these are, one I should say, thanks to the intense academic effort that has gone for over decades. And all these academic assays or the academic developments that have been initially invested, now they have turned out into assays which can be accepted by regulatory authorities. I can give you a simple example, like if you see Western blot, this is one of those very traditional assays. Any academic publication, if you see without a Western blot, the paper is still not ready. But thanks to mass spectrometry, the way it has evolved, it has actually taken over Western blot and has made the life of the scientists far more simpler in terms of giving the information, accurate information at the amino acid level, in terms of the modifications that are present on these amino acid level, in terms of the N-terminal sequencing, in terms of the disulfide linkages, etc. So this is a huge leap in the technology that has come in, especially in the area of advanced analytics. Similarly, if you look at other domains, for example, glycosylation. Glycosylation is earlier traditionally being done by, HPLC-based methods. But of late, even mass spectrometry has improved in the area of glycosylation. And also now there are fast glycan kits. Like earlier times, the glycosylation would take significantly about a day or so to generate the glycan map and then look at the initial quality product profiles. That is, as Dr. Samir initially mentioned, the quality target product profile, these are initially fixed. And then there's a sort of I would say, the specifications are available, because fortunately, in biosimilars, one of the advantage, though these are complex biological molecules, there is a roadmap available in terms of the innovator. They are either published, or there's a reference molecule which is available where the fingerprint analytics can be generated and then can be mapped against. So in terms of the, there's a rapid glycan analysis kit, which does in less than half a day. So these are significant developments that came over in analytics. And then if you look at broadly analytics, it has two different assays. One is the release assays, one is the characterization assays. And I would like to quickly share my screen, if you may allow, Dr. Partha. Thank you. And I'm very proud to say that I'm an ex-Syngene employee. I moved out of Syngene, and I had worked very closely with the National Biopharma Mission. I know my good friend Dr. Miraj Singh is there. So when we had worked with National Biopharma Mission, we established the Center for Advanced Protein. I hope you're all able to see my screen.
Yes, we are, Dr. Ravi.
Yes, we can see.
Okay,
Please
thank
go
you.
ahead.
So this slide is about, you know, the National Analytic Facility, which is built in Syngene. So I'm very honored to be the main, you know, the key principal investigator for this, where I had applied for the fund, and then the BIRAC, the NBM mission, had actually granted us this, and we established this facility in Syngene campus. So if you look at the entire the arsenal of analytics, it revolves around high-end analytical characterization tools, starting with advanced mass spectrometry, and then there are secondary structured analytical tools like circular dichroism, the FTIR, the analytical ultracentrifuge. These are essential in generating the right information, the information about the molecule, which gives us confidence as the molecule, the biosimilar, which is manufactured, or which is the initial batches or the subsequent batches. Is it comparable to the innovator or not? So generating these maps is highly essential. And if you look at the product and process characterization assays, the aggregate analysis, the charge variance, the glycan profiling, etc. In terms of the process-related impurities, the host cell protein analysis, the host cell DNA analysis. So these are routinely performed in any analytical laboratory. And then moving to the other side is the bioassays. I'm sure many of the product-based companies in India, the tier 1 companies, they have a very well-established analytical department as such. But however, you know, thanks to the entrepreneurial spirit that's happening in India, the Make in India mission, where there are companies who are actually doing this in a modular manner. For example, if you look at the analytical laboratories outside India, they may not offer an end-to-end solution. There may be analytical labs who are highly specialized in analytical ultracentrifuge. They may be highly specialized in mass spectrometry, etc. So these kind of, you know, I mean, this also speaks how niche these areas are. So for example, even in bioassays, having a bioassay which is a GLP compliant, of course, in India, it is much more, you know, having the regulatory permissions. Like for example, GLP is more well regarded, and it is much more respected, I would say, as compared to a non-GLP lab. And then, you know, overall, developing an advanced analytical laboratory is a key for advancing the molecules to the next level. And then quickly onto the next slide just give me a minute. Yeah. And if you look at once the initial screening is done on the analytical platforms, then advancing it to the next stages like the preclinical stage and the clinical phase. So these are essentially important for making these molecules reach to the market, because these are molecules are the whole sole purpose of making biosimilars is to increase the affordability, so that the molecules you know, which have lost patent, giving an opportunity for the developing company to advance this in the shortest time frame possible, and then making the medicine more affordable. So I will pause in here for a while, and I have another area which I wanted to quickly. If I have a minute or so.
Yeah, we'll come back to it, Dr. Ravi.
Okay, fine. I'll pause for a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have just covered the upstream, the downstream and analytics, but the thing actually will be carried out by people at the floor. So for the floor, one of the important addition to every new companies or industries will be the people who will be doing this. So there are freshers, and I'll call Mr. Vedaduti to just show his views that how this kind of human resource can be trained and actually can come and can contribute to the betterment of the industry as a whole. you are mute, I think, Vedaduti. Please check. Hello?
I think I mute. Okay.
Yes.
I am flashing my screen. Just let me know if my
We
screen
have
is
5
visible
minutes
or
in
not.
hand, so you have to be fast.
Sure, sure. My screen is visible. Am I
Keep
audible?
coming. Yes,
Yeah.
you are audible. You are audible.
Huh.
Yes, now we can see your screen, please. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My time, I understand, only 5 minutes. All our distinguished academicians and industry representatives. And I owe to Dr. Reddanna. Sir, you know me last 7 days only, we come to know each other, but you invited me to share my views on a particular issue that we are talking about now, bioprocess technology. We have talked about products, but we need to talk about enablers also. Okay, who will really enable the bioprocess technology, will be working in the shop floor and produce the right product. Okay, they are the real enablers and our human resource force. And I want to talk particularly regarding freshers. Okay, so I still remember around the year 1998 or 2000 when the first recombinant protein was produced in India. That was Shanta Biotech hepatitis B vaccine. And afterwards at Ukhad, I was fortunate to work with Dr. M.K. Sahib, and we produced a recombinant erythropoietin. Still, I remember those days. And I was just fresher and joined industry. He has given us the opportunity to work as industry personnel. And really, after that, in first 10 years, I must tell that was the bio process or recombinant biotherapeutics development time of India. A lot of filings used to happen at the time, and afterwards, after 10 years, I will tell that 2008, 2009 onwards, lot of biosimilar products started coming into Indian market. Now we are exporting those products into international markets, and immediately the need of scale up has come into picture. And whenever the scale up has come into picture, we need people there. Okay. So everybody really, as industry person, not all are demanding always we need experienced person. But sometimes we forget that I also start my career as fresher. Okay, so all the time it is not possible to get the experienced person. But freshers pool are enormous for the biotech industry. If we can make them ready for the industry, that's the challenge. I think we can resolve this problem of suitable manpower crunch. Okay. I want to throw some light into that direction. So how we can really make this happen. Problem statement is very clear. Getting capable hands is the challenge in for biopharma industry. We also take a lot of interviews of the experienced person, freshers in fact, but capable hands are missing there. We struggle to get the capable hands. How we can make it? Solution. We want the solution for that. And simple solution is building capability for the freshers. That could be the most probable solution. But now the question is, how can we make it? $1 billion question, how can we make it? So whenever we talk about capability building, now really I have worked in R&D, quality assurance, but last 2 years I am involved in learning and development. I am closely working in hiring the talents or training them. So I just want to share my personal experience. Okay, so what do we mean by capability in industry? That is the combination of two things: skill and will, behavioral competency and technical competency. And whenever we are talking about the skills, we talk about concept. Okay, how much that person is clear about the concept. Because whenever we are coming to industries, we have seen lot of jargons, lot of different kinds of words. Okay, 483, calibration, GMP, warning letters, CAPA, DS, DP, OS, SAP, ICH, investigation, deviation. So one freshers is bombarded with all these concepts. So just I want to share that I think 3 years back, we started one program in my company, Dr. Reddy's. We named the program as Swagatam. And we thought that how we can give, we mapped actually 200 concepts, how we can give those 200 concepts to them within 7 days. so that they will be having one level of understanding when they have they will be starting work in the shop floor, so that they will be knowing the playground, where after that they will be really putting into a right position, but they need to know the playground at first. So this concept building is very, very important, and apart from that also it is very important hands-on. But really the industry sometimes is procuring the latest equipment, or some compliance issues are there. We need to probably discard my old equipment, procure new equipment. It is very difficult to match with industry standards equipment before coming into industry. So here probably industry has to be also a little accommodative, and in institute also must be having some creative solution like virtual reality gadget. That is wonderful, so that we can give a feel to them about the industry. This is highly possible. And I am not talking about will that we can really deal at a separate point of time, but videos are also very, very helpful, because at least I remember in 1995, 15th August only, internet entered into India. We are not blessed to learn the concept seeing the videos, but nowadays if we really choose them the right video, they will be getting a lot of concept. They will be able to visualize how shop floor people can behave, or how an instrument really look. A fermenter, seeing fermenter was a dream for us. I am talking about 25, 30 years back. So finally, whatever model we are really practicing now, that is the PFT model, okay? So don't misunderstood me as a pulmonary function test model. It is definitely the oxygen for industry and institute collaboration or bridge. That is the PFT model we are talking now. P for push, okay? It is for the Bioscience Institute. They have to really push their students to expand their knowledge, how the industry actually needs. Industry-oriented curriculum. I think nowadays we are really stressing on that. Alumni network, if something probably is working in Biocon or Bharat Biotech or Serum Institute, really considering that alumni to enlighten the knowledge of the present students, industry lectures. COVID has given us a lot of opportunity. That lot of webinar is happening nowadays, where industry persons are dealing with academic institutes. I think, hope it will continue. That's the push from the institute, and tug, pull again from the biopharma institutes. So we need to have very, very good technical induction programs, so that whatever talent or whatever hands is coming from institute, we have to really grab them properly, and we have to be little
Hello.
I think
Hello?
there has been some
Network-
internet
network
issue.
issues.
Yeah.
I think we lost Veda, I think. Hello?
Yes, sir. I think we lost him.
Okay.
Is he back?
Okay.
Yeah, okay, maybe Nidhi, you call him.
Sure,
Yeah.
sir. I can do that. Oh, I can see him. Sir, you need to unmute. I'll ask. Yeah. I can see him talking.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes,
now-
yes.
you are.
One slide is remaining. Okay, if you can allow me, just now current is off, so my Wi-Fi has gone off. Okay, just give me only 1 minute. I'm running in my last slide. Yes. Okay. Is my slide is visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I was talking about EFT model, push from the industry, push from the biotech institutes, and pull from the industry. We need to be accommodative, and again, still the gap will be there. Probably finishing school kind of approach is now really growing, so that whatever gap is there, that can be filled by this finishing schools concept. And every three sector we need to try to expand, so that we can really superimpose among each other, so that industry, academics to industry, it can be a very, very smooth transformation. Okay, and it is very needed for this kind of people. Timothy, I am putting a picture of Mr. Timothy, who survived from AIDS in the year of 2007. I still HIV. He survived by a transmission. Okay, a bone marrow transfusion was happened for him, but unfortunately he died because of one blood cancer. For that, he died last year. So we could not make him survive. Okay, he wanted to smile, but we could not give him. So I think we must give the chance for the new generation with lot of energy, lot of new ideas, so they can make the miracle. Okay, and we need to make the proper platform and proper enablement for them. Really will take Indian biotech industry to the world. I am sure about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Veda. So we have covered quite a bit now. I think we are running short of time, but I'll call Dr. Miraj to just give a visibility of what is government's role, and both as a funding agencies as well as regulators, especially how the BIDAC is doing things. So Dr. Miraj, please welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Partha, for having me here. And I must congratulate you that in the manner this panel discussion is organized, the flow of discussion is going on. It's wonderfully designed. So I think this has made my work so much easier. The audiences already have seen that about the upstream, downstream, and the analytical, and the training part from Dr. Chakravarti. So this was really helpful for me. I really do not have any presentation for today, but I would just like to engage in a discussion with you. And I will be just mentioning that what has been done under National Biopharma Mission for facilitating the development of biopharmaceuticals in the country. Since its inception in 2017, the mission is working continuously for the development of a vibrant ecosystem in the country. And if you can broadly divide it, we have 4 verticals mainly. We have a vertical for biotherapeutics, vaccines, medical device and diagnostics, and training. So personally, I am looking for biotherapeutics and training. And under the biotherapeutics, there are 2 ways, you can say it's a 2-pronged approach we have. One is to directly support the product development by grant funding, and then having a commitment from the developer for developing the affordable biomolecules. We have several MABs in the country, and as you all aware that more than 100 biosimilars are already approved in India. But you see, due to the lack of a comprehensive insurance coverage, although these MABs are I mean, much cheaper than the innovator molecule, but they're still way beyond the reach of a poor person. So our effort is to make these MABs more affordable by giving direct grant funding to the developer and having a commitment from them to make them available in the market at least many-fold reduced price than what they are currently. So that is one part, but I will not be going much deeper into that. What I'm going to talk about or discuss with you is the ecosystem that we have created. As Dr. Ravi Krovidi was mentioning in his presentation, that for established first of line biosimilar companies or biotherapeutic companies in India, they have developed a lot of infrastructure within their premises. They have good analytical facilities, they have good access to manufacturing facilities. But when you're talking about an ecosystem for the startup company, that is pretty much lacking for someone who wants to work in the field of biotherapeutics. It is hard for them because this is a field which needs high capex investment. It is not possible for a person, a vibrant PhD student who have come back from US and he wants to establish a laboratory where he wants to develop an antibody molecule. Maybe he can develop the molecule, but developing the molecule further for him is very difficult. So maybe thinking on those lines, we thought that an enabling ecosystem is required in the country, and it was very helpful to see the different phases of the development of biotherapeutic product. And first, what we did that we have established at least 3 GLP or 2B GLP accredited analytical laboratories for biotherapeutics, and they have all state-of-the-art facilities under one roof. One of the lab which Dr. Ravi has already mentioned at Syngene. We have another 2 laboratories. The information, I'm not going into the details of these things, but all I'm giving you an overview about these facilities. So all this information is available on the website of NBM, but we have 3 GLP laboratories where which can be accessed by startups. And these are much more affordable in comparison to the analytical services offered by some of the overseas companies and to which Indian biopharmaceutical companies were approaching. So I must say that these facilities are very good. We have all the state-of-the-art facilities, very good people working for them, GLP accreditation. What else you need? So this should reduce the import burden or the services which we were earlier exporting to the overseas laboratory. So this should help us there. So one part was analytical laboratories for biopharmaceutical, very complex characterization, as we all know, as we heard from Dr. Samir, Dr. Ravi. Another part was access to PDL, process development lab, and a coupled CGMP laboratory where a startup company can actually make batches maybe for preclinical and clinical trials. So we have 3 such facilities, accessible basis, and these are very affordable, and NBM gets to intervene in there whenever someone puts a request to these facilities. So they are accessible facilities, shareable facilities, where people can get PDL and CGMP. Another thing I would like to talk about the cell line repositories. So we really did not have any such repositories in India so far, from where a startup company can get the parent cell line for development of biopharmaceutical, for recombinant development of biopharmaceutical. Now we are establishing such CGMP repositories. They are still under construction. And we are trying hard to establish relationship with the international repositories such as ATCC, Japan Cell Bank, European Cell Banks, where we can get cell lines on a third-party transferable basis on a very affordable pricing. And all the characterization of the cell banks can happen under these cell banks. The safe storage of the cell banks can happen. So overall, this is an overview where we can actually provide a vibrant ecosystem for someone who is starting their own company, startup, small and medium companies. Along with this, last year, identifying that our biomanufacturing is heavily reliant on imports, including media, filters, resins, everything is important. Most of it is important. And during the recent pandemic, vaccine manufacturing, we have seen that sometimes our manufacturing capacity, the capacity in the country could not be realized because there was some lack of raw material. This cannot be solved in one day, but we have taken some early steps towards it. And as a first call, we actually focused on the development of indigenous bioreactor, the bioreactor to support the suspension as well as adherent cell cultures, resins for protein A purifications. We also invited applications for disposable bags for the storage and sampling of biotherapeutics, but unfortunately, we did not get very warm response from developers here. But yes, we have the programs going on for protein A resin. We have programs going on for bioreactors. We have programs going on for indigenous development of electronic lab notebook and LIMS system and a data backup system. And I just want to share with you that this is a major challenge. I mean, this is the kind of feedback which we get from industry, that every year you have to renew their licenses. And this is something which is very expensive. Okay, we said that, okay, this can be a good challenge, and developing such an indigenous software where you really don't have to renew your licenses every year, and you can get a one-time license, unlimited number of users. All you have to do a yearly contract with the developer for maintenance, and that's it. So this is one thing we are doing. And just to take it further, we have ideas to support the development of filters and support the development of many other raw materials. And we are going to announce specialized calls for this. Development of laboratory instruments. This is one area where we are importing 100% from abroad. Under Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have to see that how many of these laboratory instruments we can develop here in India. We can make quality instruments. So this is one area. And regarding the training part, I just want to update you that under NBM, we started our training program in late 2019. And until the COVID did not start. Till March 2020, we trained more than 5,000 people in different modules, upstream, downstream, and medical device prototyping, concept of clinical trial, good clinical practices, regulatory updates in India, everything we covered. But since March 2020, March 2020, we haven't been able to organize the hands-on training, but we are continuing our efforts with on online platform like we are doing today. And this will continue, but not, as you can understand, not every area can be covered over the virtual platforms. But yes, for regulatory training and for good clinical practices and for training on environmental aspects, for ethics training on clinical trial, all these areas we are comprehensively covering. And yeah, I mean, this is pretty much from my side. And just an update about the COVID vaccine, that we really wanted to support many new platforms, as said by Dr. Sarkar in his initial introduction. We are very proud to be associated with the first DNA vaccine in the country, as well as the first, possibly the first RNA vaccine in the country, if everything remains good. We have every intention to support new platforms because these are the new and established platform, as well as for the vaccine development in the country, we have supported 6 laboratories for immunogenicity study and animal challenge study as well. So, and yes, 19 different sites for clinical trial management, because you need a very good network for the clinical trial sites. So under Mission COVID Suraksha of Government of India, we have 19 different clinical trial sites which are supporting the development of COVID-19 vaccines. So we'll be very happy to hear from you any other area which can be taken as a challenge for biomanufacturing. Raw materials and equipments we definitely see as one part where more interventions are required from government end, and we would definitely like to invite more calls for development of these raw materials and equipments in India. So this is pretty much from my side. Very happy to be here.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Miraj. I think to note that BIRAC really has grown over the years, and then I think many of the audiences and across the country in some way or the other, especially in the biologic sectors, are one or the other way is getting joined to BIRAC. Thanks for your presentation, and really let us know that what other things are happening. Personal level also, we know that we are also involved in many projects with BIRAC from different companies. So I think there are 2 questions, one from Dr. Rajan, I think from Dr. Vijayalakshmi. I think both of them are related to the training to you, Dr. Miraj. Once, besides developing industry-oriented curriculum, what other measures you would suggest to fill the gap and make students industry-ready by an academic institute? I think you can answer this. Dr. Samir also can take this one. Because both from the company as well as academics, how do we make people ready to get trained? And another question is from Dr. Sridaman, also in the same level. Most of this training is on the biosimilars, but what about creating such a regulatory curriculum for vaccines? So if you can share your thoughts, Dr. Samir or Dr. Miraj.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just give a quick, I would say a preview of what we are planning at Mumbai University. So like, as I said, basically, with respect to all these technicalities, whether it's upstream, downstream, and which, Vedaditi also pointed out, the major lack is, okay, the student actually comes with the understanding, which is very bookish, and they need that particular, what you call sort of a finishing touch to necessarily adapt themselves into the industry. So some of the things that now we are actually contemplating in Mumbai University is actually, creating this finishing courses, which are more aligned towards, let's say, not necessarily just into the technicality or the technical domains, but even the elite domains, like say regulatory aspects for a biologics industry, may it be a biosimilar or a vaccine industry. And over here, one of the plan that we have is to actually involve industry as much as possible. That we can actually bring in speakers from the industry. We can bring in the people who are established in the industry in these respective domains to speak with the students and give them a real hands-on sort of perspective as to what really happens in the industry. And for, I mean, particularly I realize that myself because I come from the industry and now I'm in the university. And, it is very evident to me that, whatever knowledge that is being imparted to the students, it's very bookish, they know what is the monoclonal antibody. And then, the assumption is that it's necessarily something which starts with a hybridoma. And, whereas in the industry, we go, directly purchasing the cell lines from somewhere. Now, what are these purchase deals? I mean, there are certain management concepts which need to be brought in, the contractual details into this particular aspects. So these are certain things that we are actually trying to build up some finishing courses on, several such aspects. And I would be happy to involve, as many industry personnel that can actually, help me design such courses, particularly for the biologics industry, because that is where I come in from. But of course, as a university, we are actually trying to do this for several different industries. So that is one major thing. And I would say that, I think Veda put it very aptly in the form of that PFT thing. There is a tug which is required from the industry as well to adopt, the freshers and perhaps mold them quickly. And there is a responsibility on the universities or on the technical institutions to ensure that appropriate information is provided to the the students, not just with respect to the know-how, but also on the behavioral side to enable them to adopt to these particular concepts of specific industries. So I think that is what I would comment on this.
So over to others. Any other questions from the audience? Professor Vedanna?
I think no.
Yeah, we're running behind time.
So with reference to manpower, I think Dr. Veda has very clearly mentioned the push and pull models, push from the academic institutions, pull from the industries. But the fill in the gap, to fill the gap, where finishing schools kind of thing, training is a must. So that is where the Federation of Asian Biotech Association has come up and started the FABA Academy and has been conducting various workshops and the training programs. This workshop is also one in that attempt. And all this is being done with the support from the industry and other institutions. And if the government also comes forward, we will be able to take up in much bigger way. I think Dr. Marais Singh from BIRAC, we have not approached it so far, but we'll be happy to approach and make it in much more systematic way. Very soon we wanted to have hands-on training. We have already tied up with CCMB, IICT, and Dr. Reddy's Institute of Life Sciences, University of Hyderabad for hands-on training. But more important is know whether the students can afford such kind of hands-on training, the costs that are involved in biology experiments. And that is where the support from the government would be very useful.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
I think over to you, Nidhi. I think there is no more questions. We have taken 10 minutes more. So, but thanks all the panelists for an excellent discussion. So.
Can I just
please go ahead.
One point here? Yeah, I actually wanted to speak about this to particularly Dr. Niraj Singh. With respect to the NBM program and these facilities which have been installed in different places, right? So I mean, what I understand, both from your discussion today as well as whatever I'm aware of, and I may be wrong in that, the facilities have been installed. For example, high-end analytics or certain process development facilities, or even cell banking and all. My only concern towards that is that I think perhaps we need something installed end to end in one place, because for example a startup, because I mean I'm actually managing the innovation center now myself into Mumbai University, and for a startup guy it is important that whatever they are necessarily working on in the laboratories or say in a fermenter or wherever they are working on, to get that analyzed immediately. Dr. Providi also mentioned that this is a very what you call intense crosstalk between the process development and the analytics, whether it is biosimilars, vaccines, whatever it might be. And there, there is no way that it is possible that somebody actually works in a lab, somewhere in Kanpur and sends the samples over to Bangalore for analysis. So, because first of all, we are talking about biologics, and we don't know the stability aspects of that particular molecule. And wherever we do it, I think one of the fundamental requirements, in my opinion, is that these are necessarily in place, as end-to-end facilities, where the process, the analytics, and hopefully even the other aspects in terms of GMP manufacturing are actually brought in together.
Dr. Miraj, any answer for that?
Yeah, I think end-to-end solutions are always good. And as I mentioned, for the process development and CGMP facilities, which are accessible facility, in process analytics and all the batch release, whatever processes you make, all the basic tests are available in these facilities, HPLC based tests. But for the extended characterization, I think one has to look forward for the other facilities which are specialized for analytical characterization. But yes, all the in-process characterization, stability testing, which can look at the basic attributes of the charge, size, and other attributes of the molecule. These are available at these process development and CGMP facilities. So that has been.
Thank you. I think we are really running here in time. So thank you, panelists and everybody and Fava. So I know that you could not hear.
Dr. Partha, if I could interrupt. There was just one question from a very long time in the chat box from one of the participants.
Somehow I missed it then.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. We can, if you could just,
please ask that.
Yeah. Besides developing industry-oriented curriculum, what are the measures you would suggest to fill the gap and make students industry ready by an academic institute?
That is the question I asked Dr. Sameer, but anyway. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that is already answered. And
maybe Dr. Guhan will.
Yeah. So I think we have been taking some steps towards it, but what is really important is that there are finishing schools where the academia and industry join together. And at IIT Madras, we've been trying to develop finishing schools. We have a research park where there are a lot of industries. There are big industries which are already set up their R&D centers, and there are very startup companies which are present in the incubation centers. So many of these companies are already, joining hands with us. We have conducted many workshops, etc. But what we need is something like the Biocon Academy or perhaps even more extended versions, whereby students get trained for somewhere at least a minimum 3 to 6 months, where industry and academia can join hands together, both in terms of conceptual training, practical training, and industry-related specifics. So this is often not taught in curriculum, where we focus
I
more
just
on.
want to say something here. Already trained people by industry, absorption of already trained. When we were designing our training program, sorry, I am taking a couple of more minutes here, but we had very extensive discussion with industry, and we had very extensive discussion with experts in the field. Just wanted to share with you. Industry does need people who have some sort of training, but industry also is not ready to absorb people who doesn't have any work experience but have all the training with him, because they are not really willing to pay him. You see, industry also need to pay person less when he is actually joining. So this is also, there has to be some inbuilt training for that person.
Yes.
But yes, I support that there should be some curriculum program, some academia programs in country who can address the specific needs towards biotherapeutic development.
I agree, Dr. Miraj, can I just quickly interrupt on that? Actually, a lot of our students, especially undergrad students, go for 6-month, internship programs as part of their project and other things, and they get pre-placement offers before even they graduate. I think, of course, this is done in most other engineering departments, but this is something that's required in the biotech department. We are willing to partner with industry, whereby they get, I think you would agree, if they get at least a 6-month experience in industry in terms of an internship or a project, the industry would be more willing to perhaps take these students. They would also be able to evaluate these students. So I think if industries can join with us to do these kinds of internships, I think it will be very helpful. This is a kind of a bridge that we would adopt.
Dr. Jayaraman, I would just share an experience. I mean,
Sure.
and Veda would be aware of this. This was basically when I was in Dr. Reddy's, and we had actually brought in freshers from IITs, different IITs for that matter, and we had actually allowed them to work in different labs, in downstream, upstream, like a month, in different labs, and eventually it so happened that almost all of them found jobs or found positions outside the country, and they flew out. So that was actually a lot of in a way waste of time for Dr. Reddy's, and I was basically part of the R&D at that time. I was actually leading the process development.
These would have been BTech students. If you had done it with
yes,
BTech
yes,
students,
this was
the
different.
Yes,
Yeah.
these were BTech students. That's true.
I just want
Don't do
to
it
add in
with
my
BTech.
experience here. In fact, we had actually absorbed a lot of interns from various institutions across India, and then there was the training was going over for 6 months, and many of these people got absorbed, and some of them have applied for extended education overseas. So I think in terms of if the gap has to be filled between industry and academia, one is joining a professional institution like Biocon Academics, Biocon Training Academy, or some specific institutions in Europe. But otherwise, nothing like a training. BCIL is one avenue, and then having a training is another avenue. In fact, in our company, we are closely working with NIPER. I'm a syllabus committee member for NIPER Kolkata, where they're starting up biosimilars program there. And also NIPER in Ahmedabad, they are approaching us, and even IIT Ahmedabad, they're approaching us for internships. So we do offer internships, and if any students in this who are participating here, please feel free to write to us if you're interested in working closely with clinical research or preclinical research activities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I could gather a few insights on, is there a scope of industry help anyway in contributing towards development of infrastructure in academic institutions?
Well, I would be very happy if that happens.
That means,
We would be too.
yeah.
I think the Department of Biotechnology has come up with a program, Builder program, and the Department of Science and Technology also has similar program, and they have come up they have provided the necessary infrastructure to most of the academic institutions, and also FIST program is another one under the DST, which has been providing the infrastructure. But of course, we have a large number of academic institutions, but not all are equipped with the necessary infrastructure. So the poor universities are not like IITs or central universities. There are so many state universities also which need that kind of infrastructure.
I think it's basically the universities is where the major student population is, and the infrastructure is actually secluded to the premium institutions. I think that mismatch perhaps needs to be brought to some level of balance.
Okay, so since all the questions from the audience is covered, I would like to thank you on behalf of the entire team of organizers, the
I
panelists.
think Dr.
Yes.
Partha may have some concluding statement.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Nidhi. I think I was always keeping Haritha on time because you have started early. And
bit of the panel discussion.
Yes, yes. So thanks for the panelists. I think we are really covered. I think we could not hear one part of the story. I think partly mentioned by Dr. Ravi. We really need to hear the CRO story part of it, because due to shortage of time we could not hear. But at least we could cover most part of the bioprocesses from starting from the upstream, downstream analytics and the human resources, and then later. And I think what we had a biotech ecosystem in the country probably 20-25 years back, when we have started probably our career in the industry. I think it has been evolved quite a bit since then, and this is because of both the government and working regulators. And really, especially in this COVID times, some of you who are like us, who are working personally, the governments, the funding agencies, the regulators, they are really coming together to overcome these challenges. And so that if there is a need, I think all can work together to bring things, and that's really shaping good. There are gaps, there are challenges, but all challenges have been throwing opportunities. So I'll close with this closing comment. Thank you again, everybody.